Welcome back, everybody, to Wild Warrior Nutrition. I'm founder and CEO Michael DeCroce. Today we have Jessica Smith, a good friend of ours, who's a registered dietitian and nutritionist. We've asked Jessica to come and join our podcast today to talk about food sensitivities and allergies and the different types of tests that you can take. Some of them are at-home tests, and so we wanted to dispel some of the, provide some information about it, about what they are and why they're important. Part of the reason I asked Jessica to come on is because I've personally had some GI issues. I've experimented with different diets like veganism and being in the superfood business. I was personally amazed to find out that some of the foods I was eating were actually causing some of my distress, despite the fact that I thought they were healthy for me. So we'll get into everything. And if you're at all interested after the show with contacting Jessica, working with her, having some of these tests performed and coming up with a plan for you, her contact information is in the description below the video. You can also, reach out to us directly at wildwarriornutrition.com, and we can get you in touch with Jessica. So anyways, without any more introduction, Jessica, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so if you
of course.
wouldn't mind, maybe you could start out by talking about yourself, what you do, and your background, and just a little information in case people want to know more about you.
Definitely. So I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, as you mentioned, and I work in the Denver metro area. I've been an RD for just over 10 years now. Actually, in 2 days, it'll be 10 years. So it's been a really fun journey. A little background on myself is I initially got into this field because I was interested in culinary arts. So I have my undergraduate degree in culinary arts. I went to Johnson & Wales University. And then during that process, I decided being a chef in a restaurant or running a restaurant was not what I wanted to do. And so I went the nutrition route versus the food service management route. So I got my bachelor's in culinary nutrition from the same school. And then from there, I decided I wanted to become a registered dietitian. And I went to a school in Illinois, got my master's degree, completed my dietetic internship, and started working as a dietitian in 2011. So most of my experience, I have a varied experience as an RD. I've done community nutrition in grocery stores. So I have some experience doing that. I've also done a lot of clinical. I've been doing clinical dietetics for 10 years. And I've also been doing private nutrition counseling one-on-one for the last about year and a half, which I really enjoy. So that's a little background on me. So I've got the culinary and the nutrition background, which is really fun to work with clients because a lot of times, cooking isn't always people's forte, but it doesn't have to be difficult. So that's why I like to combine not only talking to them about nutrition, but the practical application of how do you actually cook these foods and prepare these items on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. So, thank you. Yeah. And we have to point out the elephant in the room, which is your background, because we know that people are going to comment on it. So what is up with the background?
This was added during remote learning for one of my kids, and I forgot to take it off. So we're just gonna stick with it, and it looks like a fun place to be. So yeah,
we'll just pretend you're in the hills of Venice or something.
Exactly.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you. So when it comes to food sensitivity, like I mentioned, I had a lot of personal GI problems over the last, severe problems over the last like 6 months, and just on and off. I've suffered through seasonal allergies, skin issues, and different things. That's originally how I started getting involved in nutrition and fitness. And like I said, I was a vegan for about a year and a half and thought that was going to solve my high cholesterol and all the problems I was having. But the more plants I ate, the worse my problems got. And some of my blood work actually started to deteriorate. So for a while, I experimented with the far end of the spectrum that guys like Dr. Kim Baker, Paul Saladino would recommend, which is a carnivore diet. So I eliminated all plants, saw some improvement, but just found that eating that way wasn't sustainable. And so I went through the process. I went to a GI doctor. I did stool samples and blood work looking for autoimmune problems, and we found nothing. And so what they came up with is that you need to reach out to someone like yourself, and they recommended the Everlywell test to see if I had any food intolerances and try eliminating those. And so maybe you could start by explaining what the Everlywell test is and how it works. Or I guess let's take a step back. Maybe you could start by just explaining food allergies and food sensitivities and what they are and how they're different, and then we could get into the tests.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of delve into this. So there's a big difference between allergies versus sensitivities. So if you were to go Google online, what's a food allergy versus food sensitivity, two things that you'll see pop up a lot is IgE and IgG reactions. So an IgE reaction, which stands for immunoglobulin E, is essentially an actual true allergy. It's a hypersensitivity. So it's going to be an immediate reaction. So if you think about IgE, just think of the term immediate. And the prime example of that would be someone who has who eats an egg or who eats peanut butter and has an immediate reaction where it could be as severe as anaphylactic, where they can't breathe, or immediately having hives, very soon after consumption, trouble breathing, those kinds of things. Okay. IgE reactions there are allergy offices who work with severe reactions like that, or food allergies that over time, if you're working with a highly trained specialized person who works in this area, they are doing work where you can eventually reintroduce those foods. And some people are actually able to eat peanuts and eggs when, they've had to avoid it for a really long time or for most of their life. However, you have to work with someone who's very highly trained in this area. So that's kind of a little breakdown of IgE, just a brief breakdown. IgG is what we're talking about when we're talking about Everlywell tests or any of the other food sensitivity tests you might see out there. IgG reactions are delayed. So we said IgE is immediate, IgG is a delayed reaction. And it's not necessarily a true allergy. So the way it works with all of the different food sensitivity tests is that you'll send in a blood sample. Some tests require only a finger prick. Some require an actual little vial of blood to be drawn by a phlebotomist. You'll send it in, and essentially all the companies test the blood to different antigens a little differently. But the gist of it is that when the blood is tested against different antigens, such as, the Everlywell test, how many foods was yours tested against? Do you remember?
I can see I want to say it was about 100. It was about 50 to 100. It didn't include everything. Like one of the things that was primarily left off were beans, which was I know like those caused me problems, so I've cut those out. But I was really hoping that the Everlywell test would have included them, but it didn't. So I mean, while it covered probably the most 50 to 100 most common foods, that was one that was left off. Okay.
Yeah, and so you'll see with different lab companies who do these food sensitivity tests, sometimes they offer different tiers. Like they'll start with a 93 food test, or some go up to like 280 foods, or even more than that. And some include chemicals as well, food chemicals. But basically, just getting back to it, your blood sample that you send in is tested against all these different foods or food chemicals. And we're looking for a delayed response reaction that indicates there's an immune reaction to that food or that food chemical. And the higher the reaction, typically the higher the score will be on your results, meaning that, there's usually 3 ranges: severe reactions, moderate, and low reactive foods and food chemicals.
Yep.
And so there's lots of different cells that react in the immune system to the antigens. And so when it comes to the food sensitivity tests, we always just want to remember that it's not like a set in stone thing. We have to look at other issues too. There's a reason why the body is reacting to this way to foods. It's not that the foods are necessarily bad for you, but right now they are, just because there's some kind of inflammation or immune response going on in your body. And a lot of times it's related to things like IBS, leaky gut, which are terms a lot of people have probably heard of. And when it comes to the food sensitivity, the IgG reactions, another big thing I want to point out is that you could eat something today. And so today's Friday, you could eat something today and not experience the immune response to it until even like 4 or 5 days later. So maybe next Monday or Tuesday, you're starting to feel like super bloated all of a sudden, or having a rash or eczema pop up, something like that, getting a headache or a migraine, joint pain. Those are all common symptoms that occur as a reaction to a food sensitivity and
Okay.
IgG.
Thank you. Yeah, that's interesting because as I've started to explore this, I always eat food and then I look back one day. So tomorrow I'll look and say, well, what did I eat yesterday? How do I feel? And assume that it's yesterday's food that's causing the problem. And what you're saying is it actually could be something that I ate multiple days ago that is just slowly working through me.
Yeah. So that's a big difference between the IgE. The IgE reactions can be life-threatening and they're immediate. The IgG reactions are a delayed immune response and can happen several days after the consumption of that food or that food chemical.
Okay. And for some foods, is it possible that you eat it once and if you may not have any reaction to it, but if you ate the food every day, that it's sort of like alcohol where you're going to build up an amount in your body and it won't become toxic to you until you've had a lot of the food, where if you just ate it here and there, you'd be fine. But if you ate them every day, then it became a problem.
To some degree, and that kind of in a way boils down to what I mentioned before, where there's something else that we need to get to the root cause of that's going on in the gut, whether that is leaky gut, which is very common, which is where your intestines become more permeable than they should be. And by that, what I mean is if you think of like a really fine mesh strainer or like a coffee filter, the coffee grounds don't go through the coffee filter. But if we were to put like a net that was a lot more wide open into the coffee machine, the grinds are going to go straight through there. That's kind of what happens with leaky gut. It's more permeable, and bacteria, toxins, food particles can get through the gut lining when they're not supposed to, and that can increase those immune responses, especially when we're talking specifically about food sensitivities.
Yeah.
So, 10 years ago, that food may have not bothered you, but the fact that your gut is in a state where there's inflammation, there's increased permeability going on, now those foods are getting through your gut lining and they're causing an immune response. And now you're having your, food sensitivity related issues, such as joint pain, skin issues, headache, congestion, those kinds of things.
Okay.
So it's not, and that's why the food sensitivity tests, like I said, we always want to look a little further and see what's going on, but it's a great tool to use so that we're not guessing, because the gold standard is to do an elimination diet and, start with only several foods that we know are pretty low reactive for the majority of people. And that's great. It is the gold standard. That's how we typically have always done it. And it's still, like I said, the best way to do it. However, the great thing about food sensitivity tests is now we have a tool where we don't have to sit here and guess for 3 or 6 months what foods could be triggering these reactions and which ones aren't. We actually have a printout now showing us, what things we should avoid. So it just makes it a lot easier for the client.
Yeah. Here, just real quick, I'll show people. So it's kind of hard to see, but this is what I got from the Everlywell test. So it actually showed every food, the score, and what I've gone through is anything that was abnormal or yellow or close, like it was still green, but close enough. It was like on the edge. I've gone through and highlighted and to your elimination diet comments. For a couple of weeks, I tried eliminating those to see how I felt. And with some varying degree of success, like I said, it was hard to tell because I was guessing one day back and you're saying to look 4 days. So
yeah. And I guess, to really just get back to your original question here of, is it like dose dependent or is it frequency dependent? To some degree, frequency of consumption. To some degree it is, but the food sensitivities, there's lots of different pathways and lots of different immune response cells that could be tested in all these different food sensitivity tests. And we don't know which cells are reacting. The tests are not specified yet to where we're looking at like only this type of cell is responding or this type of cell is responding. So that's what makes it a little difficult with these tests, is that we don't know if it's because you're eating it every day. Sometimes people react to a food they've never had in their life. And so that can be confusing. Like, why am I reacting to scallops when I've never had scallops, not once in my entire lifetime? It's because there's tons of different pathways that are being tested against, and we have no way with these tests to know, is it because of something that we've eaten, or versus something we haven't eaten.
Okay.
And so that's why it's really great to work with a practitioner when you're, getting the results of any food sensitivity test that you get, because we can kind of help you, come up with a meal plan with looking at your results so that we can give you the most variety possible, because elimination diets are hard. Like, no one's going to sit here and say they're easy. They're difficult. And that's why these tests are great. We're taking the guesswork out of it for the most part.
Yep.
But it's great to work with a practitioner so we can help you delve into that and create a meal plan that's realistic for you and easy to follow.
Okay. So this is kind of a generalized question, but are there any foods that seem to be problematic for a majority of people? I was surprised by some of the foods that were on mine. Just to highlight a couple for everyone, like my most common were dairy, garlic, chicken, and what was the other one here? Oh, squash. I eat a lot of spaghetti squash and was surprised to find out that was actually the highest one on my list. But I was surprised to find that chicken, dairy, and some of the grains that I eat most frequently were on there. And so, are there other foods that seem to pop up a lot when you take these tests with people?
Yeah, so I've worked with lots of patients with doing a variety of different food sensitivity tests. And I would say, everyone's results are going to be different, of course, but dairy comes up for a lot of people. Wheat comes up for a lot of people. And then when it comes to the proteins, it just varies. Some people have no reaction to chicken. Some people react to turkey, which they never eat. So it's kind of different. But when it comes to the grains and the dairy, I would say that wheat a lot of times comes up. Dairy is a very common one that pops up for people to be reactive to, as well as something I always look for too is if anyone reacts to the different yeasts, like baker's yeast, brewer's yeast. That can be indicative of possibly having excess candida in the gut.
Okay.
And then kind of going along with that, sometimes and oftentimes when people do have those high reactions to the yeasts, I will see them reacting to high fructose fruits. And so in a way, they're all somewhat interrelated. So when I see that happen, I always want to address that there could possibly be candida overgrowth in the gut. I can't diagnose that. You could get it diagnosed. However, it's pretty simple to just avoid sugar basically in all forms, as well as the yeasts, and avoiding high fructose, which are like the higher sugar fruits, for several weeks to see if some of your symptoms reduce or completely go away.
Okay.
So yeah, those are some of the things I like to look out for too on the test.
There's a lot of talk about, like probiotics and the health of your gut biome and that sort of thing. How much of a role do you see that playing in, probiotics and gut biome? And you look like you're frozen. Can you still hear me? Jess, can you hear me? Well, everyone, looks like we have like a short-term technical difficulty. What I was getting in with Jessica, can you hear me? Oh, so she's going back in.
I lost you for a minute. Sorry.
That's okay. I was, it happens, working from home, Zooms, these are a work in progress, but I was just asking, how important is the gut biome? That's like one of those hot topic things where you see, 10 years ago, there were probably, you might have seen like pearls and probiotics only marketed towards women. Now, if you go to Sprouts, there's 10 different kinds of probiotics and different strains. And so what role do healthy gut biome and probiotics play in food sensitivity? You mentioned candida, but that's why I asked.
Yeah, huge. So that's a big focus in my private practice is hormone and gut health. Really, everything stems in the gut. I mean, we've all heard that 1,000 times, and it's definitely true. if there's something going on in the gut, it can cause symptoms elsewhere in the body, everywhere from the symptoms we've already mentioned and beyond. So it's huge. So that's why really focusing on getting your gut healthy, reducing inflammation, improving your gut microbiome is beneficial for overall health. There's tons of studies, scientific studies that have been done correlating poor gut health, and without going, too deep into that, relating to tons of different comorbidities, even including diabetes, cardiovascular disease, all kinds of stuff. Dementia, cognitive decline, everything. So it's huge. So that's why I love putting a huge focus on gut health and getting to the root cause of what's going on, just so we can improve overall health for everybody.
Yep.
And so when it comes, a big part of that can be food sensitivities. And while we're addressing food sensitivities, we also want to address what's going on in the gut. Like I mentioned before, a lot of people have been diagnosed with IBS. It's a very common diagnosis, and leaky gut is a condition that a lot of people also have, which can be highly related to the food sensitivities. So
those were two of the things that they checked for with me, and I'm glad I didn't have them. But just a side note, doing your own stool sample is terrible. That was probably the worst experience ever, having to put a plastic hat in the toilet and fill 5 little containers by myself. Was terrible. I don't wish that on anybody. That's just a side comment.
Yeah.
Please pray that you never have to do that, or make your wife do it, or your spouse do it for you, because it's terrible.
Yeah, it's not fun. However, there are some stool tests that can show us a lot about what's going on in the gut.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's beneficial to combine both food sensitivity testing and stool testing. That way we're getting a really good big picture of what's going on. Because while the whole point of kind of removing the moderate and high reactive foods for food sensitivities is that we're trying to calm the gut down and reduce inflammation as much as possible, so that while we're in that process, we can kind of work on some other modalities to heal the gut while we're reducing the inflammation with what we're eating.
Okay.
And with food sensitivities, they're not necessarily a lifelong thing. We want to try to get back in our diet as many of those moderate and high reactive foods as we can over time. So typically, it's different for everybody. Everyone's body reacts differently, but a lot of times we avoid the moderate and high sensitive foods for anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and then try to gradually challenge those foods, is what we call it, a food challenge. Bring them back into the diet, see how we do with them. We bring them back in one by one over a couple days each, and just see if any of the previous symptoms or new symptoms come with the consumption of those foods. But our whole goal is to get you eating as varied of a diet as possible after those 3 or 6 months.
Yeah.
And by that time, we hopefully have improved the gut microbiome and the whole gut situation.
So we're kind of talking about people with like known issues, skin issues, gut issues, but what about just healthy people? Is there any value in everybody having these tests done, considering they're fairly inexpensive, to sort of optimize and refine their diets to what might better perform for them?
So this, in my personal opinion, not necessarily. If you're not having any symptoms, I wouldn't, I don't recommend that everybody goes out and gets a food sensitivity test. However, if it's something you're interested in and you can afford, I wouldn't say there's any downside to doing it. If you're not noticing that you're having any symptoms, I wouldn't tell everybody to just run out and do it. So that's just my personal opinion, though. Like I said, if you have the money to do it, though, there's no downside to it.
Yeah, sure. And I mentioned that to you because our audience is sort of a fitness biohacker, very health focused people. And so I just, some of the folks watching this may be interested in just doing this test or reaching out to you and working with you for that reason. That's just the only reason I brought it up. But the next question I had, maybe the last part before we go, is I know that you really like the LEAP program, and it's a program and system that you follow. So maybe you could describe what the LEAP program is and how it differs from, the more common Everlywell tests that are out there.
Yeah, definitely. So the LEAP program, what that stands for is Lifestyle, Eating, and Performance. And it's a program that is initiated following a food sensitivity test. It's a specific test, and it's called a mediator release test, or MRT for short. So if you were to go to their website, it's leapnow.com, and you could read all about how that MRT test is done, which again is a food sensitivity test. And the lifestyle eating and performance program that follows that is what I work with most of my clients. That's the test we use. And what I love about it is that the program is designed to include, well, it has all of your results. It has a color-coded system with your results that makes it a lot easier for clients to follow. You know, my red foods are my high reactive, my yellows are my moderate, greens are my low. And there's some great booklets and information that every client gets with all of their results that the practitioner goes over with them to create a meal plan for them. It just makes it a lot easier when you have all these extra tools.
Mhm.
But the difference with this test is that you do have to get a blood sample. So it's not a finger prick. You actually go get your blood drawn. But it's a lot more sensitive of a test. So we're getting more accurate results.
Yep.
We're looking at how the white blood cells react when we mix our blood with all these different food and food chemicals. We're looking at how the white blood cells react to that. And so that's how they get their results.
Okay.
I've seen a ton of success with most of my patients who we've done this test with have had migraines, like chronic migraines. A lot of them have had IBS diagnoses from their gastroenterologist. And definitely some of them have had diagnoses of candida overgrowth. And the ones who haven't have had lots of symptoms that are indicative of candida overgrowth and fibromyalgia. So it's really great for not only GI issues, but migraine and fibromyalgia are two of the main conditions that I've seen that LEAP therapy is very helpful with.
Cool.
So, and a lot of people see reduction in symptoms even within the first like 10 to 12 days.
Okay.
It's awesome. So
I will say that one of the things I didn't like about the Everlywell test was the fact that I had to pipe it my own finger, which for those who don't know what that is, it looks like a little pin. And when you have to hold it on your finger, press it down, and it actually poke your finger, which took a couple minutes to build up the guts to. My wife couldn't actually do it, so I had to prick her finger for her and had her look away. But the other downside was all you got was a printout, and there was no guidance. There was anything. I mean, there's a few resources on there to help you interpret it, but that's it. They really, you take the test. Here's how the results were, and now you're on your own. And so for someone like me, who's I've read a lot of books, I know where to go for resources. It's a little easier, but for the average person, I found that that's probably not that helpful unless they.
exactly.
I mean, they do say, you should take this to your a qualified person like yourself or your doctor and discuss it with them. But how many people really follow up? I mean, a lot of people buying their tests are probably doing it and then just eliminating the foods. They don't understand the differences between allergies and sensitivities like you're talking about. And so I was a little frustrated with that there wasn't more like a recommendation that came out of it or anything. And so, the LEAP program does sound better. I'm sure it costs slightly more, but it does sound like a good program. I guess I'll just leave it up to you to finish. Is there anything that you want to, want people to be aware of, or anything else related to this that you want to discuss?
Sure. Yeah. Just something that came to mind just to kind of close out is that, it's not necessarily food sensitivity related, but it is definitely gut related. Is that, especially in America, we're overworked. We don't sleep very much. We're not getting as much sleep as we should. There's a lot of stress in our country, not just with what's going on with the pandemic, that just adds to it, but just in general, like I said, our work days are long. Working more is considered better, and not to mention that we have our SAD diet, our standard American diet going on here. And so we're introducing a lot of risk for inflammation. So I would just say that anyone who's having any kind of gut issues, if you feel like you're super anxious, because anxiety can be, stemming from something going on in the gut too, even depression, migraines, headaches, chronic skin issues, without even doing any testing, I would just say to try to focus on any ways you can to reduce your stress. Everyone's going to have some level of stress in their life, but if we can find some ways that we can reduce that, whether that's trying to spend a little more time outside, nature is stress reducing just naturally. If we can try to get off of our phones, an hour before we go to bed and get in a dark space so that we're having better sleep hygiene, trying to go to bed maybe an hour earlier than you normally do. Just trying to focus on these stress, sleep, those kinds of things, and eating more wholesome foods in general, focusing more on less processed foods, adding more fruits and vegetables into our diet, drinking more water. These things might seem like little things, but they can make a huge difference. So I would just say, even if you don't want to pursue any kind of testing, trying to focus on working on those things can be tremendously helpful. So
cool. Thank you. Where can people find out more about you if they wanted to work with you, or even just have a consult to see if it's something they want to pursue? Where can people find you?
So my website is thrivenutritionllc.org. And there's a contact page on there, which has my email, my phone number, and all that. And you can also just submit an inquiry on there to get more information on nutrition counseling. And then I'm also on Instagram at jsmith.nutrition. And I have a Facebook page as well. If you just search for Thrive Nutrition LLC, or my handle is at JSRD on Facebook. So just feel free to follow me there and reach out if you have any questions or you're interested in working with a dietitian.
Cool. And I did see you sent me that stuff, so I will include it again, like we talked about earlier. It'll be in the description plus in the comments below. Well, thank you again for offering to come and talk about my bowels and my own personal food allergies and sensitivities and helping me to figure it out. We hope that you'd want to come back on and be a regular contributor, talk about all things. I know nutrition is a mile wide, and there's a lot of stuff we can talk about. So anytime you want to come on, if you have a topic you want to talk about, promote, feel free to reach out. It was awesome that you offered to do this for us.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, it's been really fun, and I would love to work with you guys some more. And I just like educating people, so this is a great platform to do that. And so I'd love to come back on, and thanks for having me today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Well, again, everybody, this has been Wild Warrior Nutrition. Make sure to visit our site, wildwarriornutrition.com. If you sign up for our newsletter, you will get a weekly blog with different fitness and nutrition ideas, along with a coupon code to save on all of our supplement products. Anyways, thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon. See you, Jessica. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.